His latest book, Dark Forces, is a brilliant expose of what actually happened in Benghazi before, during, after the fateful night of September 11, 2012. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr.
Well, thank you so much. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. How many of you have seen the movie 13 Hours? Okay. Well, more of you need to see the movie. And the reason you need to see the movie is because it gives you an excellent viewpoint on the ground of what happened that night. It was a long, long battle. And there are really 6 heroes who saved the lives of 36 other Americans. There are 4 people who lost their lives, but they saved, an awful lot. They saved most of the people who were there. I'm not going to talk so much about the events of the night of September 11th, because that you can see in the movie. I recount some of it here in Dark Forces, but go see the movie. I really strongly recommend that you go see the movie. What I want to do tonight is talk to you about 4 things that have not been widely spoken about in the press, that are not being investigated, as far as I know, by the Benghazi Select Committee, led by Trey Gowdy, and that aren't widely known. And I cover them in my book. The first one I didn't cover in my book. You're going to get this in a second as we get there. But the first one has to do with what I call the smoking gun email that was discovered about a month ago, sent from Hillary Clinton's, sent from the Chief of Staff of Secretary of Defense Panetta to Hillary Clinton's office. Now, why do I call it a smoking gun email? At 7:09 p.m. on the night of the attacks, so it's 1:09 a.m.
Eastern time?
Eastern time. 7:09 p.m. Eastern, 1:09 a.m. in Benghazi. So about an hour after the security, the CIA security guys got back from the diplomatic facility, they'd lost the ambassador, they'd beaten back the first wave of jihadi attacks on the annex, and they're kind of saying, all right, where's the AC-130 Spectre gunship? Where's the drone? Where's the this? Where's the that? All right. So the email is sent from Panetta's office, and it starts off like this. It says, hey guys, tried to get you on the phone, guess you're in a meeting, but here are all the assets we've identified that are, quote, spinning up as we speak. And then 2 big paragraphs are blacked out, they're redacted. We know what's in those 2 paragraphs because we know what the military assets were. I do detail in the book. I didn't have the email at the time in the book, but I knew what the assets were. We had available a 40 to 50 man counterterrorism unit known as C-110, Charlie 110. It was the commander's in extremis force for European Command. They were on a mission in Croatia, about a 2-hour flight from Benghazi. 2 hours by C-130, okay? Less than a faster plane. 2 hours in a C-130. At the very beginning of the events, General Carter Ham, who was the commander-in-chief of the Africa Command, they were in charge of Libya. Carter Ham signs a temporary order signing that commander's in extremis force over to him. That he can do this because he was going to get it permanently a month later. That had already been programmed. So they were all waiting for this to happen. So he said, okay, shift the command over to me, then we're going to be able to deploy it. The guys were throwing their stuff into the plane as of 11 o'clock midnight. And again, remember, they're in Croatia, they're in Europe. At about 1 o'clock in the morning, Chris Peranto, who has friends in that unit, said he told me this a couple weeks ago. He said, I got off the phone with one of them, and they said, we've been told to spin down. Not to spin up, but to spin down. And they basically got out of the plane and went into the ready room and waited and waited and waited. Okay? There were 2 Marine fast companies, which are fast reaction companies, on call in Rota, Spain. And that was a little bit further away. But they were given orders later to stage to move over to Sigonella, which is in southern, which is in the boot of Sicily, right? Sigonella is just about a 45-minute flight from Benghazi. There was another unit of special forces in Sigonella. Right, so you had all these different forces, and Jeremy Bash, the Chief of Staff to Secretary of Defense Panetta, said they are spinning up as we speak. And then, lo and behold, they started to spin down. Now, why do I call this?
What time? Because
okay, the email
Eastern.
was sent.
Can you do it Eastern for us?
Eastern. This email was sent at 7:09 p.m. And there was never an answer that we know of, or that's been released. There was never an answer from the State Department.
Okay.
Okay. So here's why this is important, and this is why it's a smoking gun email.
What day was this?
This is the night of September 11th in Washington, 7:09 Eastern Washington time.
And what was the exact time that the attack started?
The attack started at 3:42 Washington time. 3:42 p.m. Washington time. Okay, so this is a couple of hours later, but you know, government, guys were getting ready. They were getting their stuff, throwing their stuff in the airplanes. But to get the orders signed takes a little bit longer. The verbal orders had already gone out.
And Panetta had been at the White House at 5 p.m.
Panetta
was on his way.
Panetta had been at the office at the White House with General Dempsey, who is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, on a previously scheduled briefing for the president. And of course, once they learn what's going on, they get briefed going down to the car to go so they can give the president the update of what happens. And from what we understand of that meeting, President Obama said basically, okay, do whatever you have to do. I got a fundraiser tomorrow in Las Vegas. I'm not going to be here, so you're in charge. Basically, do what you have to do. Right. Now, perhaps another president would have acted differently and would himself have taken charge of the effort. But I do not believe that Obama's reaction, do what you have to do, caused the stand-down. I don't think so. I think what he was essentially saying, go ahead and do what you have to do. You've got my authority to do what you need to do. So when Panetta then sends the email over to Hillary Clinton's office saying, all of these assets are spinning up, and never gets a response, that was the stand down, and here's why. She owned the facilities in Benghazi. They were under State Department authority. Both the CIA annex. Why is it called an annex? Because it is annexed to the diplomatic compound. So she owned both of those facilities. She had to authorize forces to come and rescue the people who were there on the ground, and she did not do so. The stand-down order came from the Secretary of State personally. Let me give you one other fact in that mix. General Carter Ham, in 2013, was called to testify before the Armed Services Committee in the House. Why didn't you go and send forces? And his answer, I personally think, is pathetic. But his answer on the record is, quote, because we were never asked. Because we were never asked. Now, you fit that in the context of that, what I call the smoking gun email, you begin to understand. They were, Panetta was asking the Secretary of State for approval, and she just never gave the approval. They could not go into the diplomatic compound or the CIA annex without the authority of the Secretary of State. She never gave her authority to do that. Okay. You ask me why. The reason. I don't like to psychoanalyze political leaders. I like to lay out the facts, and then we can all kind of try to piece them together as we wish. We can analyze them together, and then you can have your opinions. I can tell you what some of the security officers working on the ground in Tripoli, specifically, and I quote him in the book extensively, Colonel Andy Wood, who was the head of the 18-man Green Beret group they called the Site Security Team, guarding the ambassador. He was there with his 18 special forces guys, until August 6th, 2012. And then the State Department told him to leave. We don't need you anymore. Everything's under control, and oh, by the way, we don't want any boots on the ground. And he said specifically he was told by the diplomats, and not by Chris Stevens, but by, they were going up the channels. He was told quite specifically that when he went out with his men to protect the ambassador around Tripoli for his meetings, they were not allowed to wear their uniforms. Not only were they not allowed to wear their uniforms, they couldn't even wear their boots because Mrs. Clinton did not want boots on the ground. And he's, again, quoting from Andy Woods, the rationale was, we are not the Bush administration. We did not come in here to occupy Libya. We came in here to liberate Libya. They are our friends. So we do not need boots on the ground. We are not an occupying force. Okay. This was well known in the military. By the way, Andy Wood is not the only guy who told me that. I also talked to a number of different people in Stuttgart, in AFRICOM headquarters, the African Command headquarters. They said exactly the same thing. General Ham met with Chris Stevens in the beginning of September, when Stevens was on vacation just before he came back to Tripoli. And again, he said, look, I can give you these guys back. I can give you that 18-man security team, no problem. I'll pay for it. You don't even have to pay for it. And he said, General, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. You know I need it, but you know that my hierarchy would kill me if I asked for it.
Was that his line? Would kill me?
They would have my head. Okay, listen. I think he said something to the effect, it would not be a career-enhancing move for me to request the renewal of the site security team. So that's the first thing, and you're not that doesn't get an awful lot of play. I wrote a column about some of this in Front Page Magazine, where I write from time to time. I think it's a tremendously important piece of the puzzle because we finally know who is responsible for the real stand-down order, the ultimate stand-down order.
And she never responded.
And she's never acknowledged this.
You know she got it?
She's never acknowledged this, and unfortunately, for reasons which are beyond me, Trey Gowdy and the committee never asked her when she was there. And I honestly don't understand why, and they had the email.
She said it wasn't her job.
All right.
An email that she got, that they found in her email at her home?
This particular email was, I don't know for certain if this was found on the State Department server or on her server, but it was turned over to the Benghazi committee about a year ago, but made public about a month ago, 4 to 6 weeks ago. Okay.
So since she used her own server, did she always check the State Department's emails, or did it get?
She never used the State Department.
She never did.
Period. She did not.
So she could claim she never got this.
She didn't. Well, her people
Yeah.
got it. Okay. There's everybody. No,
Cheryl
they
Mills.
got it.
Cheryl Mills would have.
Cheryl Mills
Yeah,
got it.
somebody would have got it,
Exactly.
right.
And she never had. Hillary Clinton never had a state.gov email address.
Right.
Right.
Unbelievable. All right. Second thing. So there's going to be 4 things I'm going to tell you about that aren't widely known. The YouTube video, the famous YouTube video, right? At 10:08 p.m., September 11th, Washington time, the State Department puts out a statement from the Secretary blaming the attacks on an offensive video out on YouTube. All right? It's very clear. And as you know, this has been discussed ad infinitum. The next day, the President mentioned it. All week long, the spokesperson at the White House was talking about the YouTube video. Susan Rice went that weekend on the Sunday talk shows. Mm-hmm. And on the 24th of September, 12 days after the attacks, the President went to the United Nations and said this hateful YouTube video that caused the attacks. Well, there's some very strange things about the YouTube video. And I'm doing some new research on that I'm not ready to publish yet, but it will come out in a number of months. It was uploaded to the internet in July of 2012. got about 200 hits. Nobody cared. It's a very poor quality, amateurish production that takes events from the life of the leader of Islam, the founder of Islam, Muhammad, and caricatures them. But the actual events are, pretty accurate according to people who have actually looked at the whole script. But it's a caricature, and it's clearly not a positive. It is not intended to show Muhammad in a positive light. Okay, there's no doubt about that. Nobody cared. Nobody watched it. Nobody saw it. They had a showing down at Hollywood and Vine in July. Maybe 6 people came. Maybe. All right. Not sure that even 6 showed up. All right. It was a non-event. All of a sudden, on September 8th, there is a preacher, an imam in Cairo, who gets wind of this, and he talks about it, and then they excerpt a piece of it and dub it into Arabic and put it on Egyptian television on the 8th or the 9th of September. When that gets shown, suddenly there's several 100,000 people who start to watch the video. And in Egypt, it did become an object of controversy. And so on September 11, 2012, there were 2 events in front of the U.S. Embassy in Egypt, not in Libya. The ambassador, by the way, knew of those events. They had been warned of them ahead of time. And she knew that one of them was going to be violent because it was planned by the brother of the leader of al-Qaeda, who was in Egypt. And he was calling on his followers to come to the embassy to burn it down. So Ambassador Patterson told all of the U.S. Diplomats and personnel, go home, stay home. Don't come in on September 11th. It's too dangerous. We're just going to have the Marine Guards there. But then she told the Marine Guards not to put ammunition in their clips. So you had a demonstration in Egypt that was loosely tied to the video. You had a second demonstration in front of the U.S. Embassy that was organized by the brother of the blind sheikh, who's in jail in this country for trying to blow up the Holland Tunnel, the Lincoln Tunnel, back in 1994. And they scaled the embassy walls in Cairo late that afternoon, around 5:30, 6 p.m., 7 o'clock, I think, and hoisted the black flag of al-Qaeda. Meanwhile, back in Libya, nothing. Absolutely zero. It's calm outside the Benghazi special mission, the special mission compound where the ambassador is. He stayed home all day. He was told, don't go out. It's September 11th. You never know, something might come up. He stays home, and the attacks begin out of the blue, or I should say out of the darkness, at 9:42 p.m. An organized group of about 30 to 40 armed individuals, right, with Kalashnikovs, with RGB-7s. It was an attack from the beginning. It was not. There was never a protest, and they knew there was not a protest. Okay, never even a pretense of a protest. Now, here's the thing. So 10:08. Let's go back to the chronology. 10:08 p.m. Washington time. Mrs. Clinton puts out the statement blaming a YouTube video. That, by the way, there is nothing in the State Department records that have been released so far that shows that there was reporting about a video or a demonstration in Benghazi. She made it up whole cloth. Maybe she associated what was happening in Cairo and applied it to Libya. We don't know. But we know this, and these things are new. At about 11:30 p.m., she emails her daughter.
Yes.
On her private email server, and her daughter has a pseudonym. She's called Diana Reynolds. Okay, she doesn't use her real name. So, email to Diana Reynolds. Coming home shortly. Our diplomatic facility has been attacked in Benghazi by al-Qaeda, or by groups affiliated with al-Qaeda. Not, oh, there was a demonstration and went bad. Oh, they're worried about a YouTube video. No, she says to her daughter, the compound was attacked by groups affiliated with al-Qaeda. So she knew right then that the YouTube video story was a lie. The next day, she has conversations with the Prime Minister of Egypt and the President of Libya. Those transcripts have been released to the Benghazi Select Committee. And during the hearing, she was asked about those transcripts, because in both of those conversations, she said explicitly, we understand the attack in Benghazi had nothing to do with the YouTube video. Nothing to do with the YouTube video. And she said it to both the Prime Minister of Egypt and to the President of Libya. So, you had this, what I call it the original spin. The original spin was to blame everything on a YouTube video because in many ways it was convenient for the administration and for their agenda, which involved going along with blasphemy laws that prevented the so-called slander of religion. The administration, with Mrs. Clinton leading the way, had gone to the United Nations the year before. They'd gotten a General Assembly declaration, 1618, that essentially adopted the blasphemy laws of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. So this kind of fit in with the narrative, if you wish, that they're really horrible people in the United States. We have these religious bigots, you know, they hate Islam and they're saying awful, terrible things. We shouldn't allow it and they should go to jail. Now, speaking of going to jail, no, not Hillary, not yet. Speaking of going to jail, when the bodies were brought back to Dover Air Force Base, a couple days later, Mrs. Clinton is there with the president. They meet with Tyrone Woods' father, Charles Woods. And I've met with Charles, and he's told me this story himself, personally. And she said, you know, oh, so sorry for your loss, but we're going to get the guy who's responsible for your son's death. He said, oh, great, who's that? He said, he's a video maker out in California, and we're going to get him. And she said that to some of the other...
Mrs. Smith, I think.
Mrs.
Sean Smith's mother.
Sean Smith's mother as well. Right. Now, of course, a couple of weeks ago, Mrs. Clinton was asked about this on one of the national news programs. He said, oh, no, I never said that at all. So, you know, do you believe Mrs. Clinton, or do you believe two parents of two Navy SEALs who were murdered in Benghazi? And of course, the filmmaker was arrested 2 weeks later on a so-called parole violation, was essentially coerced into a plea bargain with the federal government, and was put away for a year. So he was taken off the street, so nobody could talk to him, nobody could get his story, nobody could find out what his video was all about or anything else. One more thing I want to say about the video that's not well known is that, remember I told you in the beginning, there were 200 hits when it was first uploaded by the filmmaker, then it started to get a couple 100,000 hits when the Egyptian television picked it up. As of about the 12th of September, the day afterwards, it suddenly appeared on a brand new YouTube channel called News Politics Now. And News Politics Now broadcast it around the world. They got 4 million hits in about 3 or 4 days, 17 million hits over the next 2 weeks, and then the channel just disappeared. Its work done. We don't know who News Politics Now is. There's been speculation in the media that it may be associated with a government contractor that works for the CIA and the State Department. I've not been able to corroborate that, but that's one of the things that I am looking into.
Did the video maker ever speak or no?
Let me just kind of hold that to myself for the time being, and let you know that there will be more to this story. Okay, there will be more to this story. Okay. Now, the tall tale about the video is the original spin. But there was an original sin in Benghazi as well. And that came earlier, and that had to do with arms smuggling. That's what the story is really all about. It's all about arms smuggling.
Iran and Syria and the rebels.
Arms smuggling. And it's arms smuggling in I mean, you'd be astonished when you go through this book, you're not going to believe the kind of stuff that was going on. It was smuggling weapons into Libya in the beginning. We helped smuggle through the Qatari Special Forces Stinger missiles into Libya, at the beginning of the conflict. And then the Qataris lost control of them. And how do we know this? Because one of them wound up in Afghanistan, It shot down a U.S. Military helicopter in July of 2012. And it hit a U.S. helicopter, did not explode. The helicopter crash landed, and they recovered a piece of the missile that included the serial number. And the serial number came from a lot that had been signed out to the CIA, signed out by the CIA, and handed over to the Qataris. Okay. Anyhow, that story's here in the book. It's an amazing story. Nobody has ever touched it yet. I've asked Trey Gowdy, why don't you go after that? And his people say, well, it's too highly classified.
So those came from Qatar and not from Iran? So.
Iran is coming. Iran is coming. Don't you worry. Iran is coming. The Stinger missiles came from Qatar. Yes. And then they bled away. They disappeared into jihadi land. Now, they're not the only missiles that disappeared in jihadi land. Remember, you may have heard that Gaddafi had 20,000 man pads. These are surface, shoulder-launched surface-to-air missiles. And the United States boasted, Anthony Shapiro, who was at the State Department in charge of the effort of collecting those weapons, trying to get them off the street. He boasted in February of 2012 that we think we've recovered or identified 15,000 of them. And that's pretty good. We got 15 out of the 20,000. So if you look at it from another way, that means there are 5,000 surface-to-air missiles that are still missing, right? 5,000. Well, at least 400, and I think 800, but at least 400 of those missiles wound up in the hands of a guy named Abdul Karim Belhaj, who became the head of the Tripoli Military Council. He was a friend of Chris Stevens. He was a friend of John McCain, who called him a great freedom fighter, even though he had been detained by U.S. forces in Afghanistan early on in the war against terror, 2001-2002, and transferred to Libya. He was an al-Qaeda member. Belhaj played a very big role in the Libyan revolution against Gaddafi, overthrowing Gaddafi, and then he went and rounded up some of these missiles, sent them down through the south of Libya to Agadez in Niger, which is, remember the arms market in Star Wars? Well, that's what it was. Well, it's the real thing. Okay, they were there. This was it was the arms market in Africa. People were selling all kinds of stuff, and what they wound up doing was taking the Libyan missiles, which were green, the long tubes were green, and modernizing them, upgrading them with batteries that they got, CIA-produced batteries for the Soviet missiles, the Soviet-era missiles, and grip stocks, which are the actual launch part of the device. They got those from Egypt, brought in through the Muslim Brotherhood. And then they went out, once they were refurbished and reassembled, they went out into jihadi land. They've turned up in Gaza, they've turned up in Sinai, they've turned up in Mali, they've turned up all over the place. Okay, the Israeli Air Force has. I asked a very good friend of mine, who's a very senior security official in Israel, and he told me, yeah, we've encountered them in Gaza, but we have countermeasures. All right, so they haven't shot down any Israeli aircraft, but they have been used against Israeli aircraft. Now, I have pictures on my website at kentimmerman.com. That show you this very unusual missile, part green, part brown. And go and take a look at other missiles that are in the hands of the Syrian, the Free Syrian Army and jihadi groups in Syria, the Nusra Front and others, exactly the same missiles. They came out from Libya, upgraded with U.S. assistance, U.S. parts, and then went out into jihadi land. Now, one of my sources in this book is a former CIA deputy station chief from Baghdad. He got wind of this going on, and he said, "Oh, this has got to be bad. It's really got to be bad." And he knew General Petraeus, who at that point was the CIA director. And so he set up to have. He told Petraeus, "Look, something really bad is going down, and involves these man pads. I know you guys want to clean them up and take them off the streets. Would you have some time so I can come in and brief you?" He said, "Absolutely, come on in next week." So he comes to Washington, going to go brief the CIA director, and all of a sudden, he's shut out of the building. Shut out of the building entirely. Never gets to turn over the information. he believes, and again, he believes that this was a U.S. government authorized operation. And it was perhaps not under CIA, under the CIA umbrella.
Not under.
Not under the CIA
And
umbrella.
that's why the
So why'd they
CIA
shun him?
compound.
So
Now it
why'd
makes
they
sense.
shun him away if it wasn't?
Because the CIA did not want to know about it. Because once they knew about it, they would have to report to Congress.
So it didn't exist.
So it didn't exist.
It didn't exist.
It
It,
did
it
not
was
exist.
one of those, yeah.
Yeah, okay, off the books. An off the books operation that he stumbled upon.
Blumenthal?
No, I think close to the White House.
Okay.
All right, so
That's
missiles were then going out of Libya to jihadis, including to the Syrian rebels. As I say, you can find those photos on the internet, and some of them are on my website, and they're immediately identifiable. You won't see missiles like that anywhere else, right? The green tubes and the brown ripstocks and batteries made by the CIA, designed by the CIA. Very specially designed, yes sir.
Did the Qataris have something to do with this?
I don't think the Qataris were involved in this one. The Qataris helped bring the Stingers in, but I don't think they were involved in this part of the smuggling. The Qataris were involved in the Benghazi-based smuggling operation, which is the reason that Chris Stevens went to Benghazi on September 11th. I'll just do this as a parenthesis before I go into the last point here. In August, there was a ship called the Entisar, filled with 400 tons of weapons from Benghazi, taken out of Gaddafi's stockpile, that went to Iskandarun in Turkey, intended for the Syrian rebels. Okay. Once it got to Iskandarun, all hell broke loose, and you had Muslim Brotherhood groups fighting with al-Nusra, and all these different jihadi groups were squabbling violently so over who was going to get the weapons. It was a lot. 400 tons is pretty good. And a couple of reporters got wind of this, went down there, and that was reported back up the chain of command. General Petraeus, CIA directors, said, okay, I'm going to Ankara to see if I can straighten it out. He made a, quote, secret trip to Ankara on the 1st and 2nd of September 2012, which obviously was no longer secret because I know about it now, and it was revealed later on. And he couldn't get it under control. So who was the guy who knew, who was our ambassador to al-Qaeda? Christopher Stevens. He was our ambassador to al-Qaeda. He was the guy who knew all the al-Qaeda leaders. He used to visit them in jail when they were in Gaddafi's jails. He spent his Christmas day in 2007 when he was the DCM, the number 2 at the embassy in Tripoli. He spent his Christmas day in 2007 meeting with Sufyan bin Kumu, who was the founder of Ansar al-Sharia, the very group that murdered him 5 years later. All right. So he was our ambassador to al-Qaeda. So when there was a problem with a shipment, who do you call? You call the guy who knows the bad guys. You know, our guy who knows the bad guys, and that was Chris Stevens. And that's why he was sent to Benghazi. He was sent there to put a lid on it, to get control on it. I don't think he was sent there to enable armed shipments to the Syrian rebels. I think he was there to try to shut it down or at least get it under control. They didn't want a public relations disaster 6 weeks before the presidential election. Yeah.
So, if Petraeus secretly went to Turkey, but the meeting prior to the event was with the Turkish
Consul General.
And the operation didn't exist, it was not part of the CIA. So who would have arranged the meeting with the Turkish consul prior to 3:42 in the afternoon?
Okay, I communicated with him, and he claims that Stevens contacted him directly because they knew each other.
Okay.
They knew each other, all right? But why would he go see the Turkish consul general?
Right.
Okay,
Especially if
and by the way, when you go, as I did, and you look at the the resume of this particular consul general, he was an intelligence officer. Okay, he was an MIT officer. He was a Turkish intelligence officer. It's absolutely crystal clear. All right, so he was there, also dealing with jihadi groups, and trying to get a handle on the arms smuggling going out of Benghazi through Turkey to the Syrian rebels.
So
All
they
right.
were actually working together.
Yes.
He was
Yes.
he was not privy to what was going to happen next.
I don't think he was privy to what was going to happen. He considered himself a friend of Chris
Right.
Stevens, and I think that he probably would have said something
He
if he had.
portrayed that in the movies.
Yeah, I think he probably would have said something if he had sensed that something was going to happen. All right. Now, the fourth point that I want to bring up that has gotten zero coverage, is the involvement of the Islamic Republic of Iran Quds Force in the attacks. Now, I got wind of this really early on during the Libyan civil war. A friend of mine who was a defense contractor was in Benghazi, and he started sending me these text messages and then emails, and then he called me a couple times. He said, Ken, the Iranians are all over here. I said, what do you mean the Iranians are all over there? He said, the Iranians are all over here, and they're working with a certain faction of the rebel groups. I said, you got to be kidding. No. I said, you got to be kidding me. He said, yeah, they're all over the place. I said, okay. So I started to pull on threads, talk to sources, and talk to different people. Two different Iranian defectors who I know very well, I've worked with in the past, who I know have good information, who do not know each other, do not have contact with each other. Each of them had heard pieces of the story through their sources in Iran, pieces of the story. One of them, for example, knew that the head of the Iranian base in Benghazi was a Revolutionary Guards officer named Mohammed Judaki. Great, okay, that's not bad. The other guy did not know that. I said, he never mentioned his name. I said, okay, Judaki. So then I took the name and I put that in front of my U.S. intelligence contacts, people who had access to databases and things like that, and out pops a huge rap sheet on Mohammed Judaki. They know exactly who the guy was and his position in the Quds Force, and they also knew that he was in Benghazi. A second name that popped out was Khalil Harb. Khalil Harb is a Lebanese. He was a Hezbollah guy, a Hezbollah military commander. He was the liaison on the ground with the Libyans. Why? Because he's an Arab. He's not a Persian, right? He's not Iranian, he's an Arab. Easier for him to, get along personally with the Libyans, who are Arabs and not Persians, and who might not want to be talking to somebody they think is a Shia Muslim rather than a Sunni Muslim. Okay. Another source gave me a wire transfer document which showed money coming from a known Iranian money launderer named Babak Zanjani. Babak Zanjani. And a guy who was very, very well known, laundered billions of dollars for the regime in oil money. Okay.
That was in Turkey, though, right?
No, he was based in Malaysia. And he sent money from his accounts in Malaysia through a bank in Europe to a quote-unquote real estate company in Benghazi. He sent several wire transfers, somewhere between $30 and $50 million altogether. And that money was used to recruit Ansar al-Sharia, to create this new militia, to train them, to equip them, to arm them, and then ultimately to send them off for their mission, which was to attack the U.S. Embassy. The other name that was given to me was the big guy. I call him Mr. Chops in the book. His name was Mehdi Rabbani. Mehdi Rabbani is a two-star general. There are not very many of them in the Revolutionary Guards. There are very few of them in the Revolutionary Guards. And I believe that he came with an operations group of Quds Force officers under cover of a Red Crescent medical and humanitarian team. Himself. And there are photos on my website. You go check out the photos on my website. Okay, go take a look at those. All right, take a look at his pictures and take a look at the Red Crescent team. Now, here's this gets. Let me tell you the story here. It gets a little bit complicated, so stay with me here. All right, you've got 7 Iranians doctors, doctors, humanitarians, coming from Tripoli. They arrive in Benghazi on the 31st of July, 2012. 31st of July. That night, they're at a Ramadan dinner and an iftar dinner, come back to the hotel about 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. They're being followed by the CIA people, okay? They knew that the CIA base was all over them. They knew that they were coming. They knew they were bad. They had reporting on this. They had something like 50 to 60 intelligence reports on what the Iranians were doing in Benghazi, okay? The Iranian teams were on the radar of the CIA, of that CIA base. Absolutely. Okay? They knew. And they knew they were bad, and they knew they were coming. They didn't know what they're going to do. So our guys are tailing them, and a couple hundred meters away from the hotel, all of a sudden these gun trucks come out of nowhere. And once you see the movie 13 Hours, you'll understand how this happens in Benghazi. The gun trucks came out of nowhere, set up a roadblock, kidnap, air quotes here, kidnap the 7-man Quds Force team posing as doctors, and take them away. Or take them off the streets.
What date is it?
This is the 31st of July.
Okay.
31st of July. 31st of July. Okay. Now, here's what really happened. And I know this again from my Iranian sources, and from I've been able to corroborate this with American sources as well. Here's what really happened: is that the Iranians were into our comms. They had the frequencies of the radios that our guys were using, and they were listening to us all the time. They knew exactly. They knew that we knew who they were. So, right? They said, "Oh, the Americans have figured out who we are. Well, let's see what we can do." And they pulled off a magnificent deception. An operation intended to deceive the CIA base. Kidnapped, taken off the streets by Sunni extremists who didn't like Shias. Right, that was the story. That was the cover story that was told. And they completely disappeared. They completely disappeared until October 6th, well after the attacks. Right? Now, in the meantime, there's one of the security guys who was at the diplomatic facility claims that there was an effort to go rescue them by the CIA annex. I'm not sure that that's true or not, but he had a source who was close to the militia that had captured them, Ansar al-Sharia, by the way, just to make it nice and coincidental, who told him, no, they've been released already, no need. So it was a double, triple deception. And essentially what happened, they were taken off the streets, they went to their buddies, Ansar al-Sharia, who were preparing the attack on the U.S. diplomatic facility and the CIA annex, and they were able to beaver away in quiet with nobody watching them. And Mr. Chops said, okay, the operation's a go. As soon as the ambassador comes, the operation's a go. So they waited until the ambassador came, and then you had Iranian Quds Force officers who were actually supervising the attack. You know, they had cell phones and walkie-talkies. They were in the building across the street. They were supervising the attack, watching what was going on, making sure that, you know, things happened. And then later on, at 5 o'clock in the morning, after several waves of attackers had been beaten back by 6 guys on the roof, or 6 plus a couple of stadies, so 9 guys up on the roof, they themselves, the Iranians themselves, launched the mortars that killed Ty Woods and Glenn Doherty. Now, I say that with a pretty high degree of confidence for the following reasons. First, none of the Libyan militia groups had any experience using mortars. They didn't use mortars. They really didn't. The Libyan military didn't have any experience with mortars. I mean, the Gaddafi military didn't have any experience with mortars. People who are U.S. Mortar operators have told me it is not a simple thing to get 3 shots on target out of 5. You have to dial in mortars, you have to have accurate coordinates, and it takes a little bit to walk in the mortars and to get them on target. In this case, the first shot went long, the second shot went short, and the next two were right on target and killed Glenn Doherty and Ty Woods. And the fifth, I forget where the fifth hit. It hit someplace else in the compound. So they had 3 out of 5 right on target. That is the action of an experienced mortar operator. The Iranians are fantastic mortar operators. They had lots of experience during the Iran-Iraq War. They shut off so much munitions that they had to create a cartel in Europe to make sure that they had enough gunpowder to supply both Iran and Iraq during that 8-year war. It was a story I covered many, many years ago. 10 different companies with all of their gunpowder explosives plants around Europe. They had to divvy up the contracts. They were blowing off hundreds of thousands of rounds of munitions every month. They're just huge quantities. They were experienced mortarmen. And it was the people who killed Glenn Doherty and Ty Woods were experienced mortarmen. So those are the 4 things I wanted to kind of lay out on the table, and we can open it up for questions. The smoking gun email, the bit about the YouTube video, the smuggling into and out of Iran, and finally the direct Iranian military. I'm a very American-centered, and I think many people in the Middle East are too, and I think a lot depends on our election. If we have a strong president in the White House, all of a sudden some of the evil ones go scurrying back underneath the rocks. Look what happened when Ronald Reagan was sworn in. The very minute that he was sworn in as President of the United States, the Islamic Republic of Iran released our hostages. The minute. Not 10 minutes, not an hour, not 2 days. The minute he was sworn in. That's okay. They waited until he was sworn in. They did not do it when Carter was president. So I think a lot depends on our administration, who we have as president. You haven't asked a question, and then back to here.
Actually, this is unfortunately
my question. I think you saying this 8 years, this is all the U.S. and really bad.
I can't
Look at the 8 years before you had wars, and I think this administration is just trying to have not wars. He got support from the Europeans to do exactly what he has done, and Europe is actually still supporting him in this mission. So I think your base is a little bit sheep. The problem is this problem has been gone on for 20 years. No one knows the solution, and you can say it is all Clinton's mistake, which could be all Bush's mistakes before. So I think this is very, very one-sidedness. And the unfortunate thing is there's a lot of people there who just want to live.
Who just want to?
Live in
Of
peace.
course, obviously.
So I think just to say this one administration this was really upsetting me right now. And you can hear this in my voice.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that the Americans have been so light on in the last 8 years.
Yeah, I think there's a qualitative difference between the war in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan and what we've seen since 2009.
Correct.
A qualitative difference. You are absolutely correct that the Europeans supported us in Libya. Absolutely right. The French, and the British in particular were very supportive of getting rid of Gaddafi. Gaddafi had come to Paris about a year before the war began, and he refused to buy Rafale fighter jets. And Sarkozy was very, very eager to sell him a couple $2 billion worth of Rafale fighter jets, and Gaddafi didn't buy. And I was told by some pretty senior French officials, if Gaddafi had spent a couple of €1 billion while he was in Paris, he would still be alive and still be in power. So
What happened to the Shah of
leaders
Iran?
in Europe often have venal motives as well. I don't think that's the case with President Obama. I don't think he was venal. I don't think that's what's behind it. I think it is an ideology on the part of the president, and it is a very different ideology than the one of President Bush. And the wars were qualitatively different as well. So come and buy the book. I have them up here.
You can find more
I have my
from the
book about Iraqi Christians as well. Yeah. So. All right. Thank you very much.
I'd like to invite Councilmember Kretz's office.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, I want to present this certificate of appreciation to you.
Oh, well, thank you so much.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just going to read it out loud, if you don't mind. The City of LA salutes and celebrates your longtime advocacy of humanitarian work. Your tremendous dedication and unwavering commitment to those in need is much appreciated. We thank you for your excellent service and accomplishments in securing a more just and tolerant society for all. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah,